Okay, as promised, here is an example of how to put together a dinner for the North Store project. So what I chose as an example is a dinner for somebody with hypertension. Hypertension is a condition for which you would adjust somebody's diet, but it wasn't something that we covered in class. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm giving you this example, obviously nobody can use hypertension as their wild card. But it's not particularly sexy, so hopefully nobody else picked it. Alright, so the first thing that you need to do is think about what are the criteria for your particular diet, for your particular dinner that you're working on. If it is just the straight up all-American diet, that's pretty straightforward. You are going to have, if you're working with adults, then you're going to want 1,000 kilocalories or less total in your dinner. And the 1,000 kilocalories is not necessarily, etched in sand, but you don't want to go over it. It's no fair meeting all of your dietary guidelines and also blowing the weight issue. So if you're using 1,000 kilocalories total, then what you want to shoot for is that in order to get 1,000 kilocalories, you're assuming that that is half of all of the calories that somebody is going to be consuming in one day. And so of those, in those half of the calories, you should meet half of the daily dietary guidelines. Your meal should follow roughly the My Plate proportions. If you think about the My Plate icon, that is a plate where half of the plate is taken up by fruits and vegetables, a quarter of the plate is taken up with meat or a meat substitute, and a quarter of the plate is has starch or carbohydrates of some sort in it, a carb source. So that works out to be, if you assume that a total plate has about 2 cups of food on it, which is kind of small, on the small side, that means that for every half cup of some sort of protein source, and that works out to be 4 ounces, which is like a quarter-pounder steak, quarter-pounder burger. So for every half cup of protein, you have half a cup of starchy grain and 1 cup of fruits and vegetables. And then you have, in addition to that, 1 serving of dairy or dairy substitute. And here you know that what they're after is the calcium and the vitamin D that is added to the milk. So if there's a substitute that makes sense for your particular diet, orange juice is a good one, and then we've talked about some other dairy substitutes in class that you could use. Alright, so for my hypertension diet, I'm going to customize it, and you should too, based on the principles that we talked about, how you modify diets for people with various medical needs, medical conditions, or life stages. So for hypertension, what you want to do is restrict the amount of sodium in the diet to 1,500 milligrams per day. And that's less than the 2,300 milligrams per day that's in the typical, that's the limit for the dietary guidelines. So because this is half of the meal, then it means half of the daily food, then it means that in this one meal I have to have half of the 1,500 milligrams. So those are my goals. So to put together a meal, I think the best place to start is to think about putting together a meal that meets the My Plate proportions, all right? So you've got some sort of protein source. In the dietary guidelines, they seem to just love fish. So I'm going to make my meal with fish. And then for my starch, I'm going to choose whole grains. Why not? And I'm going to choose a quinoa salad because it's a whole grain that I happen to be really thrilled about at the moment. And I thought this was a really pretty picture. And then over here, for my fruits and vegetables, I thought I would do a spinach salad. Spinach is one of those superfoods that just tops the list for just about every one of those nutrients in the that the dietary guidelines monitors. So it's an easy answer to just a whole bunch of things. So in this spinach salad, they had some almonds, some strawberries, and I'm not going to do the avocados because those avocados are kind of high in fat. But I'm gonna try and do the almonds. I'm not gonna mess with the sesame poppy seeds, but I know that if you take spinach and you just toss it with orange juice instead of a regular dressing, it's really delicious. And also the orange juice helps to liberate some of the iron from the phytates and oxalate that's in the spinach. So that helps with iron absorption. So that's a good thing. And then in this quinoa salad, I like this picture, but it was just, I thought that was going to be too much work to put in EatRight. So what I'm going to keep is I'm going to keep the quinoa. I'm going to put some green onions in there and the red peppers. And then instead of mango, I think this is mango, I'm going to put in some tomatoes, and I'm not going to use the black beans. That's just overkill. Okay, so that's my basic plan, and then I'll of course throw in some milk. I love milk. Alright, so here's from this overall idea of what I want to do. Then you gotta sit down and make a list of what it is that you're going to put into the EatRight software. So here's my list. 8 ounces of 1% milk, 4 ounces of salmon, 4 ounces of quinoa, and that's the cooked volume. As you'll see, to make quinoa, you actually end up with more of that. Then 8 ounces of mixed fruits and vegetables. Here's what I'm going to have: spinach, strawberries, almonds. That's not really a fruit or vegetable, but oh well. A little bit of orange juice, grape tomatoes, green onions, red peppers, and lemon juice. Lemon juice is for the salmon. Maybe for the quinoa. Alright, so after you've got your plan, then you've got to have something to the details of what you want to compare it to. So what I did is I made a list of the dietary guidelines, and then I also put down at the bottom the special thing that may not be on the dietary guidelines for all people, but that you want to customize for the item that you're considering. So here I've got the daily amounts, right, that you would use, that comes straight from that cheat sheet that I had you guys make at the beginning of the semester. And then in this column, what I did is I took half of those amounts to account for the fact that there's only 1,000 kilocalories that we're eating. So this is my target list of what I want to do. One thing that I did for the fat is listed as 20 to 35% of the kilocalories, but sometimes it helps to convert it to grams, because in some of the EatRight reports you get numbers in grams. so that might be easy. So don't forget that there are 9 grams per kilo. Actually, it's the other way around. There's 9 kilocalories per gram. I messed that up. I think I somehow did it right anyways. So when you do that math, you end up with the number of grams that you're allowed, which is easier to work with. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so let's take a look at the EatRight software that I put together for this. So I loaded up the EatRight software on day 4 with all of my foods. And along the way I did a little research, and I looked online for a lot of these recipes, like here and here, and I got some proportions, like here's Mediterranean quinoa salad, and they said that a serving size to make 6 servings, and you end up with 1 cup per serving, you use 1 cup of uncooked quinoa. So that tells me that the amount of uncooked quinoa that I would use would be 1/6 of that, which I'm just going to approximate as 1/4 of a cup, just to make the EatRight stuff easier. So let's go back to this. Okay, so you can see that what I did is I looked up each one of these things, and then I made them whatever they were. Usually they come out as grams. I just divide things up into ounces because I think it's easier to work with. Remember that 8 ounces is a cup, which makes 2 ounces, 1/4 of a cup. So remember that we wanted, for every 4 ounces of this, we wanted 4 ounces, which is a 1/2 cup of this, and I'm using a 1/4 cup cooked because we're going to end up with a cup of salad. That's about 1 serving. And then the spinach, when I sat and I looked at the salads, spinach, when it's cooked down, ends up being a really small amount, but when you make a salad out of it, it's huge. So what I did is I took 8 ounces of spinach and then put in all these ingredients that I'm going to put into either the quinoa salad or the spinach salad, and made them about 2 ounces apiece. So that's a 1/4 cup. And if you think about how big a 1/4 cup is, that's not reasonable. That may be a lot of green onions, but it's a place to start. Okay, so after you enter that into the EatRight software, then the question is, what type of report do you want to use? Okay, so first, if you try to use any of the bar graphs, the recommendations, any of these things, what they will show you is, first of all, they show you how it compares to you personally. And remember that your intake, your recommended intake for somebody who's your age may be a whole lot more or a whole lot less than 2,000 kilocalories. Also, the age is an issue. So looking around the room, many of you are of an age where the dietary recommendations are different than what is for the typical person. So that may play a role as well. And certainly if you were to try and put together a menu or a dinner for a senior, the numbers that your EatRight software would give you for you would be way off compared to what would be appropriate for somebody of a different age. So I think the better way to go is to use this checklist here that you make yourself for what you want to do, modify it for each dinner, and then just use the spreadsheet report. Okay, so when you do the spreadsheet report, here it's going to give you all 4 days at first. All right, so let's do show report. And here's my report for my meal. So, don't look at my weight. So, what you have is in this view, you have the list of all the foods, and then for each one of these categories, it gives you the total down at the bottom. Now, the beauty of this report is if you get through all of this analysis and you find out that in one category you're short or you're over, you can go back and look at which one of the foods that was in your list is the contributor, and maybe you can make a change. So for example, when I did the analysis, I found that the total fat that I had was okay. It was within range, but it was a little bit on the high side. So by looking through this list, you can see what are the big contributors. Well, the fish, of course, but fish is good for a lot of reasons, so I'm not going to leave that one out. So if I was going to fudge anything, yeah, keep this, don't show this again. If I was going to fudge anything, I would probably go for the nuts. Look at this. Just like this is half an ounce, so this is like a tablespoon, contributes 81 or 63 calories of fat compared to the 83 from the salmon. Who would think? It's huge. So by doing that, you can look for the targets. And if I saw that, then I might think again about substituting something else in here that's crunchy and that contributed the same other nutrients. So from these totals, you can write down how much you got in each of the categories and total them up. Now I wanted to say one thing about the My Plate, right? So the exchanges and the My Fruits, My Dairies, etc. Don't use these. I'm not really happy with the way they come up. They're just too picky. Just use the My Plate as a guide in the way that I showed you to design the portions and the targets for your total. They're really supposed to be guidelines that help you to end up meeting the dietary guidelines, and they're not wholly in and of themselves. Alright, so the spreadsheet is what will give you the numbers that you want. Alright, so let's go back to my particular example again. So here was my checklist, and here's the numbers that I ended up with. So my meal was 691 kilocalories. I had a whole serving of whole grains. I had fish in there. The total fat should have been somewhere between 20 to 35%. It was 29%. But the saturated fat was pretty low. It was only 5% of the kilocalories, and I could do up to 10%. The cholesterol was under limits. The calcium was above the target range, which is good for calcium. The potassium was good. Potassium, we don't get enough potassium. Fiber was exactly dead on. Vitamin D, I forgot to write down. We'll see, maybe that was an issue. We'll never know. And then I ended up having 2 1/4 cups of fruits and vegetables, and the recommendation was 2 to 2 1/2 cups for half of your meal. And then remember that for hypertension, what you want to do is have less than 750 milligrams, and my total came in at 378 milligrams. So if I wanted to spice this up and make it a little bit more palatable, first of all, I would check and make sure that I had enough vitamin D in there, but I might look at, I have a little bit of sodium to play around with, but not much fat. So what I might do is look at, God forbid, just salting the fish with a little bit of salt and see if you can get away with that. All right, hope that's helpful.